Hi, I'm Gary and this is episode 76 of EV Musings, a podcast about renewables, electric vehicles and things that are interesting to electric vehicle owners. On the show today, we'll be continuing our occasional series on EVs you can buy, and we'll be looking at the Peugeot e-2008. Before we start, I wanted to say that this week I've recorded an excellent conversation with Sam Clark from GridServe. Hopefully this will be part of a follow-up discussion we have on the charge point operators, and it looks like that episode will be the opening one for next season, so that should give us all something to look forward to. Our main topic of discussion today is Peugeot's e-2008. It's been out for something like 6 or 8 months now, and I was approached by a listener who has one and who's agreed to come on the programme and talk to me about the car and his day-to-day usage of it. Welcome to Nnamdi Jenkins-Johnson. Nnamdi has had his 2008 for about 3 months and previously had an i3. As you know, we're big fans of the i3 on this programme, so we'll be sure to come back and ask him how the 2008 compared with the BMW. Obviously, we wanted to know why he plumbed for a 2008 after owning an i3.
That's a good question. So I have to say, I absolutely love the i3, and obviously my kind of I do a lot of comparisons between the two cars, which is probably not fair. So after my lease expired on the i3, I wanted to get a new i3. But the prices had gone up, quite a lot in the 2 years since I'd had the car. Looked into getting some other cars. So I did some research into the Kona and the e-Niro, but they weren't. I think at the time, so this is 2018. They hadn't produced that many of them. They weren't available, and I ended up having to go back to an ICE car, unfortunately. Yes, I know. I won't go into very many details about that because it's been a 2-year nightmare. So I was just looking for something that was affordable, that was sort of roughly around the same price as I paid for the i3 back in 2016. The e-2008 came up as an option. So the choices I had at the time were the MG ZS EV. I thought about the Zoe as well, but that didn't have enough space really. And the 2008 just kind of fits with my requirements, in terms of price of the lease, the space, the range. So I went for the 2008.
I was interested to know whether the SUV styling of the car appealed to him.
I wouldn't say it appealed to me, and I know it's done as an SUV, but it's more of a kind of souped up hatchback. Really, it's not really SUV like. I will confess. So the car I had before the 2008 was another Peugeot. It was a 3008, and that is an EV. That is an SUV. Sorry. Mm-hmm. The 2008 is a lot smaller. It sits lower on the ground. It sort of has the same. The height off the ground is probably similar to the i3 actually, and that kind of appealed to me. So kind of going back to that car. So yeah, it wasn't necessarily because it was an SUV that I went for. It was more to do with the price and the range I was able to get out of it, if I'm honest.
So how far is he driven in it?
I would have normally been doing my commute to work. I sort of live in London and work outside of London, and my commute is about a 60-mile round trip. In between the various restrictions we've had around lockdown, I've managed to do a few good trips, and I've even managed to go out to France in it actually, and that was about a 600-mile round trip. So I've put about just over 1,000 miles on it. And in terms of the range, I think kind of getting roughly, I think it's down. The WLTP is 200 and something miles, but I definitely haven't seen that. I think realistically, in terms of the kind of driving I've done, I've been getting about 180 on a good day.
Okay. That's not bad. I'm looking at the EV database at the moment, and they say the real range is about 155.
Yeah.
So if you're getting above that, that's not bad at all. Has the change in the weather affected the range drastically?
Not that I've noticed, but again, I haven't been using it since Christmas, really, with what's been happening with lockdown. So most of my driving has been before the weather really turned very cold. But it does have a heat pump, so I don't has kind of helps to mitigate, the losses you get, in colder weather or not.
Right.
I mean, from my experience with the car so far, I don't think that's going to be a huge issue, particularly the way that I drive it. I'm always in eco mode, always B mode driving. So I tend to, just not go crazy when I'm driving it. So
One of the contributors to increased range is regen. How good is the regen on the 2008?
it's not great. That's one thing I think that I don't like about the car is that there's not enough regen, particularly comparing it to the i3, where I think a lot of people have complained about the i3 having too much regen, but I don't think that you can have such a thing really. I really enjoy that almost one pedal driving feel of the cars. And the 2008 doesn't have that at all.
Of course, there's also a school of thought which says that when you're driving on the motorway, the regen function is actually slowing you down and causing you to use more energy to overcome the regen effect than you actually get from the regen itself. I know of an e-Golf driver who always turns the regen off when on the motorway to extend his range, but the physics might not be 100% accurate on that. One selling point for the E2008 is the charging speed. It's alleged to top out at 99 kilowatts. Has Namdi ever experienced that?
Yes. So the trip we took to France, I was able to charge. Another thing actually I should mention is that you're not able to easily see the charge you're getting or the state of charge actually of the 2008. It doesn't have. You can't see what battery percentage you have. So it's just got the GOM with the estimated range you can do. There's no battery percentage visible until you plug the car in, which again is another very annoying thing. So when it's charging, you can't actually see how kilowatts you're getting into the car. It tells you the range, the speed of charge in miles per hour, which is just bizarre. Bjorn Nyland has done some videos around the 2008, and he's figured out a way of calculating. If the charger doesn't tell you, how much it's putting into the car, there's a way of calculating based on what Peugeot are displaying, where you can kind of figure out what that is. And I think if I've done the calculations correctly, I think I've got about sort of 90 odd kilowatts out of it, which isn't too bad really.
That whole thing of not seeing the state of charge or charge speed seems a little backwards, especially when other vehicles such as the Hyundais, the Kias and the Teslas have it.
Yeah, I honestly don't understand it. It should be the simplest thing. And funnily enough, it is visible, it is available once you plug the cable in. You can. So it's not a software thing, or I just don't understand why they don't have it.
Which brings us on nicely to what doesn't Namdi like about the E2008.
The stuff that annoys me, regen. Not having the regen of an i3, for example, really bothers me. The app isn't great. Again, comparing it to the i3, where you were able to open doors, windows, etc., just from your app was amazing. The only thing you can really do on the 2008 app that's useful is that's one area where you are able to check the percentage of your battery actually is via the app, and just check on your charging basically and pre-cool or preheat the car. That's about it.
Does it allow you to pre-cool and preheat without it being plugged in?
It can, but I think the battery needs to be above a certain percentage. Otherwise, it won't allow you to do that.
Anything else you dislike about the 2008? Are there any inconveniently placed buttons, for example?
Okay, so the buttons I'm not a huge fan of. So something I've heard other reviewers talk about is the fact that the climate control, you can only adjust it through the touch screen. It's not a huge problem for me, but what is more of a problem is the fact that it's quite laggy. The touch screen is really slow, and it takes a while to kind of react to your prods. And also some of the buttons. So, for example, I believe it's a navigation and sort of there's certain buttons that are not tactile buttons. So, and my wife particularly hates them. So you can't tell whether you don't get any feedback from when you're pressing them. So but these are very small things, in the grand scheme of things. So,
as we mentioned earlier, Namdi used to have an i3. So how do these two cars compare from the point of view of performance?
I would have to say it's not as speedy off the mark as the i3, but that again is not an issue for me. I like I said, I use it to get to when I was able to go into work, to get into work and do a bit of shopping, pick the kids up from their various activities. So I'm not, looking to break any records in the car, but it's definitely not as speedy, it's not as responsive as the i3.
Having driven an i3, I'm not surprised the performance of the E2008 doesn't quite match up to it. It's a nippy little car. But what about the build quality?
The Peugeot doesn't have all the kind of sustainable ethos that the i3 has, in terms of using recycled material and carbon fiber and all that kind of stuff. It looks okay. It looks quite decent. I mean, I love the exterior of the 2008. I think it looks amazing. I really, really like the way it looks.
Yeah.
The interior as well has some kind of fake carbon fiber stuff, which I'm not overly amazed by, but it does the job. Nothing sort of rattles or shakes or anything like that. I love the seats. The seats are really good quality. They've got this sort of mix of faux leather and material, which works really, really well. It's very comfortable to sit in. So I think, I would say I prefer the seats in the 2008 than the i3 in terms of how comfortable they are.
So would Namdi go back to the i3?
I'm not sure. There are a lot of things I like about the i3, but it doesn't have the same amount of space. So the 2008 has a bigger boot, for example. Also, the spec I have on the 2008, if I was to try and get those things on the i3, so the i3 that I had was the entry level, I believe. So I'm missing quite a lot of the stuff I've currently got on the 2008. Adaptive cruise control. It's got a panoramic roof, which is really nice. Keyless entry. It's got this kind of smart beam assist thing. So it's got full LED lights. And then when you're turning curves, there's a secondary light that kind of flashes on the corner, like not the blind spot, but like a section of the road that you wouldn't necessarily get lighting on, which is really, really clever.
Oh, yeah.
Like that.
One thing to remember about the E2008 is that the sat-nav, like many sat-navs in non-Tesla vehicles, is using a fixed database which is not regularly updated over the air. But is it any good?
It's good enough for me to use it because in the sat-navs in cars, I find out initially whether there's Apple CarPlay or Android Auto and just plug it in straight away. But the Peugeot 2008 uses TomTom, which I used to use before. We had apps such as Waze. So I was keen to kind of try it out, and it actually works really well. It's not without its flaws. So, for example, it doesn't keep up to date as much as a Google Maps or Waze would, and I've actually had a few fines from driving down roads that have had sort of restrictions on them that the map didn't know about.
That's no good. Oh, good grief.
Which is a bit annoying. So I won't use it all the time, but I do feel comfortable using it.
The final question I had to ask Namdi is the same one I ask every driver who comes on to talk about their EV. Is he happy with the car?
I am. I have to say I am happy. I mean, in an ideal world, I'd like a little bit more range, perhaps. It's a 50 kilowatt hour battery with, I think, 45 kilowatt hour usable. So that's the one thing I think. If I could change one thing about a car, it would be just having a little bit sort of, e-Niro size battery would be great. I think on the whole, I am happy. I have to say.
Thank you very much to Namdi for his time. He, quite sensibly, isn't on any social media, so I can't actually put any links in the show notes for you to contact him. It's time for a cool EV or renewable thing to share with your listeners. Rivian delivery vans have been spotted in the wild in Los Angeles. I'm quite excited to hear about this. Amazon-backed Rivian have finally got their new delivery vans out in the wild delivering packages. At the moment it's in Los Angeles, but it's still good to see. They've received a little bit of stick for the pedestrian sound that the vehicles make when driving at slow speeds. But given the huge number of these that have been ordered, it's great to see them out there, and anything which makes it a little bit safer for the pedestrians is always welcome. And that's the show for today. Hope you enjoyed listening to it. If you want to contact me, I can be emailed at evmusings@gmail.com or use the EV Musings Twitter account, MusingsEV. If you want to support the podcast and the newsletter, please consider contributing to become an EV Musings patron. The link is in the show notes. If you want a quick reference ebook to read on your Kindle, I wrote a little something called So, You've Gone Electric. It's available on Amazon worldwide for the measly sum of 99p or equivalent, and it's a great little introduction to living with an electric car. At the moment, if you've got Kindle Unlimited or the Kindle Lending Library, it's free. Please check it out. Links for everything we've talked about in the podcast today are in the description. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe. It's available on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave a review, preferably 5 stars, as it raises visibility and extends our reach in search engines. Thanks as always to my co-founder Simon. His wife told me he ate all his Christmas chocolate one evening before bed and it gave him strange dreams. She awoke to hear him talking in his sleep.
There's certain buttons that are not tactile buttons.
Thanks for listening. Bye.